Lena had been running her small diner in the heart of the town for over 10 years. The little place had been in her family for generations, and though it had once been bustling with regulars, now it seemed as if time had moved on and left the diner behind. The walls were painted a soft yellow, but the paint was chipped in places and the wooden chairs had scratches from years of use. Yet, despite the worn appearance, there was warmth in the diner that couldn't be faked. Lena had made it a place where people felt comfortable, whether they came in for a quick coffee or to sit for hours talking to a friend. It was a rainy afternoon when she noticed him for the first time. He came in slowly, shaking off the drops from his worn-out coat, his shoes scuffed and wet. Lena saw him hesitate by the entrance, looking around as if he were unsure if he was welcome. She instinctively smiled, hoping to give him a bit of courage. She had seen people pass by her diner, lost in their own worlds, but something about this man made her pause. There was a heaviness in his eyes, a quiet exhaustion that spoke of long nights and longer struggles. "Come on in," she said softly, waving him toward a booth near the window. The man nodded, a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but enough for her to know he was grateful. He walked over slowly, each step seeming measured, cautious, like he was not used to being treated kindly. Lena watched him as he settled into the seat, his hands trembling slightly as he pushed the menu toward him. She knew he was too tired to even really look at it. "Don't worry about the menu," Lena said. "I'll get you something warm. You look like you could use it." The man looked up, surprised. He opened his mouth as if to protest, but no words came out. Instead, he nodded, and she could see the faintest trace of relief wash over his face. Lena quickly went to the kitchen and began preparing a simple meal. She had some soup on the stove, bread in the oven, and she added a little salad for good measure. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, filling, and made with care. As she placed the bowl in front of him, he looked down, almost embarrassed. "I can't pay for this," he said quietly. Lena shook her head. "It's okay. Consider it a gift. Sometimes we all need a little kindness without asking for it." He hesitated for a moment, then slowly lifted the spoon and began to eat. Lena watched him take the first bite, and for the first time in a while, she saw a spark of life return to his eyes. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The diner was quiet that afternoon, the rain tapping gently against the windows. Lena went about her work, cleaning tables and filling coffee cups, but she kept an eye on the man. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, and she could see the way his shoulders relaxed with every spoonful. It wasn't just the food that seemed to comfort him. It was the thought that someone cared enough to offer help without judgment. After a while, he finally spoke, his voice soft and rough from disuse. "Thank you," he said. I haven't had a meal like this in a long time." Lena smiled. "Everyone deserves a warm meal, no matter what they've been through." He nodded, looking down at his bowl again. There was a pause, and then he looked up, his eyes meeting hers with something she couldn't quite place. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. A connection formed in that small moment of shared humanity. As he ate, he began to tell her a little about himself. Not everything, just fragments of a life that had been hard. His name was Daniel, and he had been working in a city far from here until recently, when everything seemed to fall apart. A job lost, a home lost, and family that couldn't support him anymore. He had been wandering, unsure where to go, when he found himself standing outside her diner. Lena listened quietly, offering nods and words of encouragement, careful not to pry too much. She understood that sometimes the act of listening was enough. The more he spoke, the more she realized that life could be fragile. One day, everything might seem fine, and the next it could all crumble. She thought about her own life, the struggles she faced running the diner, the bills that never stopped coming, and yet she felt grateful for the strength to continue. She had never been rich or famous, but she had purpose, and moments like these reminded her of that. Daniel finished his meal slowly, savoring the last bites. Lena brought him a cup of tea, warm and soothing, and he accepted it with a quiet smile. For a moment they sat in silence, watching the rain outside, two strangers connected by something simple yet profound. Lena felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized that giving didn't always have to come with a reward. Sometimes the act itself was enough to make life feel meaningful. As he prepared to leave, Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small coin, holding it out as if to pay. Lena gently shook her head. "Keep it," she said. "You need it more than I do." He hesitated, then nodded, tucking the coin away. He stood, brushing off his coat, and looked around the diner one last time. "Thank you," he said again, his voice filled with sincerity. Lena smiled, wishing him well, not knowing if she would ever see him again. After he left, Lena went back to her work, but her mind lingered on the man. There was something about him, something that made her feel hopeful even in the midst of her own struggles. She didn't know why, but she felt that their meeting was more than coincidence. Life had a way of surprising people, and perhaps she thought this was just the beginning of something unexpected. The afternoon passed slowly, with the rain eventually easing into a light drizzle. A few regular customers trickled in, chatting quietly and sipping their coffee. Lena moved between tables, serving with her usual warmth, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Daniel. She wondered where he would go, what he would do next, and if he would find the help he needed. There was a curiosity in her that couldn't be ignored, a sense that his story wasn't over and perhaps neither was hers. As the day turned into evening, Lena closed the diner for a short while to restock and clean. She moved methodically, washing dishes, wiping counters, and organizing the small kitchen. Her movements were automatic, but her mind was alive with thoughts of the day's unexpected visitor. She realized that in giving a small act of kindness, she had received something in return, a reminder of why she continued to run the diner, why she endured the long hours and the financial struggles. It wasn't for money or recognition. It was for moments like these, moments that reminded her of the goodness that still existed in the world. That night, Lena sat alone in the diner after locking up, sipping a cup of tea and listening to the gentle hum of the refrigerator. The lights outside reflected softly on the wet streets, and she felt a quiet peace settle over her. She thought about Daniel and wondered if he would remember her, if he would find some way to continue his journey with hope instead of despair. She felt a small, almost imperceptible sense of anticipation, as if life had just opened a door and she wasn't sure what would come through it, but she was ready to see. Lena didn't know that this simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. She only knew that she had done the right thing, that she had offered warmth and food to someone in need, and in return she had received a sense of connection and purpose that no money could buy. As she turned off the lights and stepped out into the cool night air, she felt a quiet hope that perhaps tomorrow, life would hold something extraordinary for both of them. The next morning, Lena arrived at the diner before the sun had fully risen. The streets were still quiet, the air crisp with the memory of last night's rain. She opened the doors and stepped inside, letting the familiar warmth of the diner embrace her. The smell of coffee brewing mixed with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread reminded her of why she continued to wake up early, even when life felt heavy. As she prepared the day's menu, she couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. He had left so quietly without fanfare or explanation, but something about him lingered in her mind. Lena wondered about the journey that had brought him here, and where it might take him next. There was a humility in his presence, a quiet dignity despite his apparent hardship, and she found herself hoping that he would find the help he needed. Around mid-morning, the door chimed and Lena looked up, expecting one of the few regulars who had begun returning. To her surprise, it was Daniel. He looked slightly more composed, though still worn, and he smiled faintly at her. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying the same gentle tone as yesterday. Lena smiled back, a mix of curiosity and warmth. "Good morning," she replied. "Come in. Sit anywhere you like." He chose the same booth by the window, settling in as if it were already familiar to him. Lena noticed that he carried a small satchel, worn and patched, hinting at a life that had seen better days. She poured him a cup of tea and placed it gently in front of him. He nodded in thanks, and for a moment they shared the silence, a comfortable pause that spoke volumes about trust and connection. "I wanted to come back," Daniel said finally, breaking the quiet. "I needed to thank you again properly. Not just for the meal, but for everything. For treating me like a human being, not just a number or a problem." Lena felt her heart lift slightly. She had not expected gratitude to take this form, and it moved her more than she could put into words. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "Sometimes kindness is all we can give, and it's its own reward." He shook his head gently. "I know, but it's rare to find someone who gives without asking for anything in return. I wanted to tell you a little more about myself, if you don't mind." Over the next few hours, Daniel began to open up. He spoke about his past life, a career in a city far from here, working long hours and striving to provide for his family. He spoke carefully, choosing his words as if they were fragile. Lena listened attentively, pouring more tea when his cup ran low and offering small gestures of comfort. He told her about the dreams he had once held, the people he loved, and the unexpected twists that led him to the streets of this town. His voice carried no bitterness, only a quiet sadness and a longing for stability. Lena found herself drawn into his story. She could see the determination that had once driven him, the same determination that kept her running the diner despite financial struggles and exhaustion. She asked questions gently, giving him space to reflect and share. It was as if the walls of the diner themselves leaned in to listen, absorbing the weight of his experiences. The simple act of listening, she realized, was powerful. It allowed Daniel to feel seen, to feel that someone believed in his worth even when life had stripped him down. As Daniel spoke, Lena noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. He was still cautious, still careful with his words, but there was a lightness now, a sense that sharing his story relieved some of the burden he carried. His eyes, once clouded with exhaustion, held a spark of life that had been absent before. Lena felt a sense of pride and hope in this. She understood that kindness, even in its smallest form, could nurture the soul in ways that were impossible to measure. Hours passed like minutes, and the diner gradually filled with the hum of morning activity. Regular customers trickled in, and Lena moved between tables, serving with practiced ease. Yet her attention kept drifting back to Daniel. He sat quietly, occasionally speaking, occasionally pausing in thought. There was a vulnerability about him that touched her deeply, a reminder that everyone has battles unseen, struggles hidden beneath the surface. Eventually, Daniel fell silent, staring out the window at the brightening streets. Lena brought him a fresh plate of food, a simple sandwich and some fruit. "You need to eat," she said softly. "Even the strongest people need nourishment." He smiled faintly, accepting the meal, and for a moment they simply existed in the shared space of the diner, two lives intersecting in unexpected ways. It was a rare connection, the kind that didn't require explanation or expectation, only presence and understanding. He looked at her then, his eyes reflecting gratitude and something else she couldn't quite place. "I've never met anyone like you," he said quietly. "You see people, not just their circumstances. That's rare." Lena felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of validation for the struggles she endured daily. She realized that even in the midst of her own challenges, she had the power to make a real difference in someone's life. And perhaps, she thought, that difference could ripple outward, touching more than one person in ways she couldn't yet see. They talked for a long time, moving from past experiences to dreams for the future. Daniel shared small hopes, tiny ideas of what he might do if given a chance, and Lena encouraged him gently, offering insights from her own life. She told him about the diner, about the hard days and the little victories, about the importance of perseverance and belief in oneself. He listened intently, absorbing her words like a lifeline thrown across a turbulent river. By the time the afternoon arrived, the diner had quieted again. Daniel stood gathering his satchel, and Lena felt a pang of sadness. She didn't want him to leave, though she knew he had to continue his journey. "Thank you," he said again, his voice filled with sincerity. "For listening, for caring. I won't forget this." Lena smiled, feeling a mixture of hope and anticipation. She knew that their meeting was more than chance, that there was something about this encounter that would leave a lasting impact on both of them. As he stepped outside, the sunlight breaking through the clouds illuminated his path. Lena watched him go, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. She returned to her work, cleaning tables and preparing for the evening, but her thoughts kept returning to Daniel. She wondered where he would go, what choices he would make, and whether he would find the help and support he needed. There was a sense of curiosity, an understanding that life had a way of surprising people in ways they couldn't predict. Evening arrived, and the diner settled into its familiar rhythm. Lena closed the doors for a short break, reflecting on the day's events. She thought about the connection she had shared with Daniel, about the trust and openness that had been exchanged. She realized that sometimes the simplest acts, offering a meal, listening without judgment, could carry profound meaning. They could change the course of someone's day, even their life. As she prepared to leave for the night, Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter with Daniel had reminded her why she continued to persevere, why she poured her energy into the diner despite hardships. It was not for profit or recognition, but for moments of genuine human connection, for the chance to touch a life and be touched in return. She stepped out into the cool evening air, the streets glistening from the day's rain, and felt a quiet anticipation, a sense that this story was far from over, that life had more in store for both her and the man she had helped. The next day, Lena arrived at the diner with a quiet anticipation she could not shake. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar warmth greeting her like an old friend. The small space smelled of fresh bread and coffee, and the soft hum of the early morning made the diner feel alive even before any customers arrived. Lena began preparing for the day, setting out cups and plates, arranging condiments neatly on each table. Yet her mind kept drifting back to Daniel. She wondered if he had moved on, if he had found somewhere to stay, or if he might come back again. As the morning progressed, the door chimed, and Lena looked up with a hopeful smile. To her surprise, Daniel stepped in again, his presence a little steadier than before, though he still carried the weight of hardship in his eyes. He smiled faintly, and Lena felt a surge of warmth and relief. "Good morning," she said, motioning him to his usual booth. "It's nice to see you again." He nodded and settled in, placing his small satchel beside him. Lena poured a cup of tea and set it gently in front of him, and for a moment they shared the quiet, peaceful atmosphere that had grown comfortable between them. Daniel looked around the diner with a small, almost nostalgic smile. "It feels good to be here again," he admitted. "Even for a short while, it feels like a place of calm." Lena nodded, understanding perfectly. She knew that moments like these, simple and unassuming, could carry a deeper significance for someone who had been through struggle and loss. As he sipped his tea, Daniel reached into his satchel and pulled out a small notebook. He opened it carefully, as if its contents were precious. "I've been writing a little," he said softly. "Trying to make sense of things, life. It doesn't always make sense, does it?" Lena shook her head gently. "Not always, but sometimes sharing the story makes it easier to carry." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers with gratitude. "I think that's why I keep coming back. It's not just the food or the warmth, it's knowing someone sees me, really sees me, even when I'm at my lowest." Lena smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle in her heart. It was remarkable how a simple act of kindness could create such profound connections. They spent the morning talking quietly, sharing stories and reflections. Daniel spoke more openly about the events that had led him to this point: lost jobs, estranged family members, the loneliness of moving from city to city with no place to call home. Lena listened intently, offering small words of encouragement, never interrupting or judging. She could see the tension gradually leaving his shoulders, the way his expression softened as he spoke. By the time he finished, he seemed lighter, as if releasing some invisible burden. Lena reflected on her own life, thinking about the challenges she faced running the diner, the bills that seemed never-ending, and the exhaustion that sometimes weighed her down. Yet she also felt a quiet pride. She realized that her efforts, though modest, had the power to touch lives in ways she could not have imagined. Seeing Daniel regain even a small sense of hope reminded her that her work, her care, and her kindness mattered. Daniel reached into his notebook again and showed Lena a few of his writings. They were simple, heartfelt reflections, observations about life, and dreams he still hoped to pursue. Lena was impressed by the thoughtfulness and depth in his words. "You have a gift," she said softly. "Your words, they carry something special. Don't ever stop writing." He smiled, a little embarrassed but clearly touched. "Thank you," he murmured. "It means a lot to hear that from someone who truly understands." As the day went on, more customers began arriving. Regulars trickled in, their conversations blending with the quiet music Lena had playing in the background. Yet throughout the activity, the connection between Lena and Daniel remained steady. They moved between small talk and deeper reflections, a rhythm that was comforting to both. Lena noticed how Daniel's confidence grew, how he began to speak with more ease, and she felt a deep satisfaction in seeing the transformation take root. After lunch, Daniel excused himself briefly to step outside. Lena watched him go, noticing how he paused to look at the sky, the rain from the previous day having left the streets glistening under the sun. When he returned, there was a small envelope in his hand. He placed it on the table in front of Lena, his hands slightly trembling. "I don't have much to give," he said softly, "but I wanted you to have this. Just a small token of thanks for your kindness." Lena looked at the envelope curiously. She could feel the significance of the gesture, though she had no idea what it contained. Hesitant but intrigued, she opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a handwritten note and a small, curious item, a folded piece of paper with sketches and ideas, something that seemed ordinary but carried a weight of meaning. The note read in simple, heartfelt words, expressing Daniel's deep gratitude and his hope that Lena's kindness would continue to touch others as it had touched him. Lena felt a swell of emotion. She had not expected anything in return, yet this gesture reminded her that the smallest acts of generosity could ripple outward in ways that were unexpected and profound. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity and reflection. Lena found herself thinking about the envelope, about the note, and about Daniel's presence in her life. She realized that sometimes the universe had a way of sending people into our lives for reasons we could not immediately understand. She felt a quiet sense of anticipation, a belief that something meaningful was beginning to unfold, though she could not yet see the full picture. As the diner closed for the evening, Lena carefully placed the envelope in a safe spot behind the counter. She reflected on the day's events, on the depth of conversation she had shared with Daniel, and on the unexpected gift he had left behind. It was not just the item itself, but the thought and intention behind it that touched her profoundly. She realized that life was full of these small, extraordinary moments, moments that carried the power to change perspectives and open new doors. That night, Lena sat alone in the diner after locking up. She sipped a cup of tea and stared at the small envelope on the counter, feeling a mixture of curiosity and hope. The day had been ordinary in many ways, the same tasks, the same routines, but it had also been extraordinary in the quiet ways that mattered most. She understood that her simple act of kindness had created a ripple, one that had already begun to influence her life in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. She thought about Daniel and the courage it must have taken for him to return, to share his story, and to offer the small token of thanks. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that even the smallest gestures could carry profound significance. It was a reminder that life was not measured only by success or wealth, but by the impact we had on others, by the connections we forged, and by the kindness we extended even when there was no expectation of return. As Lena closed her eyes that night, she felt a quiet sense of peace. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tasks, and new moments to navigate, yet she also felt an underlying excitement, a sense that the envelope, the note, and Daniel's presence had opened a door to possibilities she had never imagined. Life, she realized, had a way of unfolding in surprising ways, rewarding those who acted with compassion and an open heart. The following days brought a subtle change to Lena's life. She arrived at the diner each morning with the usual tasks to attend to, but there was a new energy in the air, a quiet anticipation she could not shake. The small envelope from Daniel sat behind the counter, and though she had not opened it again, she felt its presence like a gentle promise. It was as if the universe had quietly shifted, sending a signal that things were beginning to change. Customers started returning in small numbers. Regulars who had drifted away trickled back in, drawn by the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and the warmth of Lena's smile. There was a subtle buzz of curiosity, as if the town had caught wind of something special about the diner. Lena noticed it but didn't think too deeply about why. She focused on her work, serving meals, washing dishes, and keeping the tables tidy. Yet underneath it all, she felt that something significant was about to unfold. One afternoon, a man she did not recognize walked in. He was well-dressed, carrying a briefcase, and he seemed to be observing the diner with a careful, calculating gaze. Lena greeted him with her usual warmth. "Hello, welcome to the diner. Can I get you something to eat or drink?" He smiled politely. "Thank you. I'm just looking around for now," he replied, his eyes scanning the room. Lena didn't push, but she watched with quiet curiosity. There was something in his presence that felt deliberate, purposeful. Over the next week, more visitors arrived who were different from the usual crowd. Some were curious, others seemed impressed by the cozy ambiance and the way Lena treated her guests. Word had begun to spread, not through advertisements or promotions, but through stories. Stories of a kind woman who had offered a starving man a meal and listened to his story without judgment. The tale, passed along by those who had witnessed it or heard about it, had created a ripple effect, drawing attention to the diner and its owner. Lena couldn't help but reflect on how quickly things had shifted. Just a few days ago, the diner had felt quiet and isolated, struggling to make ends meet. Now it was alive with a new energy, a sense that the world had noticed her small acts of kindness. She worked harder than ever, yet she did so with a renewed sense of purpose. Each smile from a customer, each word of thanks, reinforced her belief that even in small ways, she could make a meaningful impact. Then one morning, an unexpected visitor arrived who would change the course of her life. A man slightly older with a confident demeanor and sharp eyes approached the counter. He introduced himself as a local investor who had heard about the diner through a mutual acquaintance. He spoke with genuine interest, asking Lena about the history of the diner, her vision, and the challenges she faced. Lena, somewhat surprised by his attention, shared her story candidly, speaking from the heart about the struggles and joys of running a family business. The investor listened carefully, nodding and asking questions that showed he truly understood her perspective. He was impressed by her dedication and the reputation she had earned through kindness and hard work. "Your diner has something special," he said finally. "It's more than a place to eat. It's a place where people feel seen and valued. That's rare, and it has great potential." Lena felt a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She had never imagined that her small acts of generosity could attract such attention. Over the following weeks, the investor returned several times, discussing ways to help Lena improve the diner, attract more customers, and create a sustainable business. He offered guidance on everything from menu changes to small renovations, always emphasizing the importance of maintaining the diner's unique charm and welcoming atmosphere. Lena felt both nervous and excited. The opportunity was overwhelming, yet it felt like a natural extension of the kindness she had shown Daniel and others who had walked through her doors. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to visit occasionally, his presence a steady reminder of the beginning of this transformation. Each time he came, he brought a quiet encouragement, a reflection on how far he had come since first entering the diner in need. Lena saw the subtle ways he was rebuilding his life, finding small jobs, reconnecting with distant friends, and regaining confidence in his abilities. Their conversations often turned to future possibilities, both for him and for the diner. Daniel's support was unwavering, yet never intrusive, allowing Lena to take each step with her own strength and vision. One afternoon, as Lena was arranging flowers on a table, the envelope Daniel had left weeks ago finally caught her attention again. She picked it up, feeling a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Slowly, she unfolded the contents. Inside was a small set of sketches, notes, and a detailed plan for expanding the diner while preserving its warmth and intimacy. There were even suggestions for community events, ways to give back to the town, and ideas for creating a welcoming environment for everyone who entered. Lena's eyes widened as she realized the thought and care Daniel had put into this gift. It was not just an item. It was a blueprint for growth, a tangible representation of gratitude and faith in her. She spent hours going through the notes, imagining the possibilities. Each suggestion sparked new ideas, and she began to envision a diner that could thrive while maintaining its heart and soul. The investor's visits and guidance now aligned perfectly with Daniel's vision, creating a synergy that Lena had never expected. It was as if two separate forces, one of mentorship and one of personal connection, had converged to create an opportunity she had only dreamed of. As the days passed, the diner transformed. Small renovations were made, guided by the investor's expertise and inspired by Daniel's suggestions. New menu items were introduced, but the comforting classics remained, honoring the tradition Lena cherished. Community events were planned, bringing together townspeople in celebrations of food, friendship, and support. Dinner became more than a business. It became a hub of connection, a place where generosity and kindness were not just remembered but actively celebrated. Through it all, Lena maintained her simple, genuine approach to life and work. She continued to serve meals with a smile, to listen to her customers' stories, and to offer help where she could. She understood that the true value of her success was not in profit alone, but in the way her actions created ripples of positivity throughout the community. Every day she saw the effects of her compassion, the tangible ways in which kindness could change lives. By the end of the month, Lena's diner had become a vibrant, thriving space. The investor was impressed by the progress. Daniel's encouragement remained a steady presence, and Lena herself felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She realized that her decision to help a starving man weeks ago had set off a chain of events that had reshaped her life. It was a reminder that small, selfless acts could lead to extraordinary outcomes, often in ways that were impossible to predict. Sitting alone one evening after closing, Lena reflected on the journey so far. The diner, once quiet and struggling, now pulsed with energy and life. She thought about Daniel, the mysterious gift, and the support she had received from unexpected places. Her heart swelled with gratitude and hope. She knew that life had a way of rewarding those who acted with kindness, and she felt a deep sense of peace knowing that her efforts, though simple, had created a lasting impact. As Lena turned off the lights and stepped out into the cool night air, she felt a sense of anticipation for what was yet to come. The diner had transformed, but so had she. She had learned that generosity, empathy, and courage could create opportunities beyond imagination, and she was ready to embrace the next chapter of her life, whatever it might hold. The diner had transformed in ways Lena had never imagined. It was now bustling with customers, each one drawn not just by the food but by the warmth and kindness that seemed to radiate from the small space. The renovations, inspired by Daniel's thoughtful gift and the investor's guidance, had brought new life to the diner without taking away its charm. New menu items were popular, but the comforting classics remained, keeping the essence of the place intact. Lena moved among her guests with a smile, serving meals, listening to stories, and offering the same generosity that had first inspired her journey. One morning, as she prepared breakfast orders, Daniel stepped through the door once again. This time his appearance was different. His clothes were neat and well-fitted, and there was a calm confidence in his posture. Yet there was still the familiar warmth in his eyes when he looked at Lena. She felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of surprise, pride, and curiosity. "Good morning," she said, motioning him to his usual booth. He smiled, taking a seat. "Good morning, Lena," he replied. "It's wonderful to see how far you've taken the diner. It's remarkable." Lena felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I couldn't have done it without your help," she said, thinking of the sketches, notes, and guidance Daniel had provided. He shook his head. "You did all the work. I only offered a little direction. The real strength was yours." As the day went on, Daniel shared more about his own journey. He spoke of small steps he had taken to rebuild his life, of finding temporary work and reconnecting with people who had once mattered to him. Lena listened with genuine interest, realizing that their bond had grown into a friendship built on trust, mutual respect, and shared understanding. They laughed at small jokes, exchanged thoughtful reflections, and spoke about the future, imagining the possibilities that lay ahead for both of them. Later in the afternoon, a few familiar faces appeared in the diner. The investor had invited a small group of local business owners to visit, intrigued by the story of Lena's kindness and the diner's transformation. They came to see firsthand the thriving space that had grown from compassion, curiosity, and determination. Lena welcomed them warmly, explaining the history of the diner, the challenges she had faced, and the small acts that had led to this remarkable change. The visitors were impressed, not just by the success of the business, but by the humanity that permeated every corner of the diner. Daniel watched quietly, his expression thoughtful. After the visitors left, he turned to Lena. "Do you realize what your kindness started?" he asked gently. Lena shook her head. "I only did what I thought was right at the time," she replied. "I never imagined it would lead to this." Daniel smiled. "It's a reminder that even the smallest gestures can create ripples that extend far beyond our understanding. You gave without expecting anything in return, and the universe responded in ways you couldn't predict." Lena felt a warmth in her heart. She had always believed in helping others, but now she truly understood how powerful a single act of compassion could be. Over the next few weeks, the diner continued to flourish. New customers arrived daily, some drawn by the story of the kind woman who had offered a meal to a starving man, others intrigued by the vibrant atmosphere and delicious food. Lena worked tirelessly, yet she felt energized rather than exhausted. There was a deep satisfaction in knowing that her efforts were creating joy, comfort, and a sense of belonging for so many people. She thought often of Daniel, grateful for his presence and the inspiration he had provided. One evening, as Lena was closing the diner, Daniel approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Lena," he began, "there's something I've been meaning to share." He paused, taking a deep breath. "When I first came here, I was lost. I didn't know how to move forward or who to trust. You gave me a meal, a moment of kindness, and a space to be myself. That changed everything for me. But there's more. I've been quietly able to rebuild my life, and now I want to help you in a way that matches what you've done for me." Lena looked at him, her heart racing with curiosity and a hint of disbelief. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Daniel reached into his satchel and pulled out a small stack of documents. "I want to invest in your diner in a way that allows you to expand, hire more staff, and create programs to help others in need. I want to ensure that the kindness you've shown is multiplied, reaching even more people." Lena felt tears welling in her eyes. She had never expected such generosity in return, yet here it was, offered without hesitation or expectation. She realized that her small act of giving had come full circle, returning in a form more profound than she could have imagined. With Daniel's support and guidance, Lena began planning the next steps for the diner. They discussed hiring more staff, hosting community events, and creating programs to assist those who were struggling, much like Daniel had been. The town's response was overwhelmingly positive, with people offering help, advice, and encouragement. Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that her diner had become more than a place to eat. It had become a beacon of hope, connection, and generosity. As the weeks turned into months, the diner's transformation continued. It became a hub of community activity, a place where people gathered not just for meals but for conversation, support, and shared experiences. Lena's life had changed in ways she could never have predicted, yet the essence of her journey remained rooted in kindness, empathy, and courage. Daniel remained a constant presence, a friend and partner in the shared mission of creating a space that nurtured both body and spirit. One quiet evening, as Lena wiped down the tables and prepared to close, she paused to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the day she had offered a meal to a starving man, never imagining the chain of events it would set in motion. She realized that life's greatest rewards often came from the simplest acts, from the willingness to give without expectation, and to trust in the goodness of others. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the people who had touched her life and the opportunities that had unfolded. Daniel approached her once more, a small smile on his face. "You've created something extraordinary," he said softly. "Not just the diner, but the spirit it embodies. Your kindness has changed lives, including my own, and it will continue to ripple outward." Lena nodded, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that each day brought new opportunities to give, to connect, and to grow. Yet she also knew that she had reached a point where the impact of her actions could be seen and felt by everyone who walked through the doors of her diner. As she locked the doors and stepped out into the cool night air, Lena felt a quiet sense of peace and accomplishment. The diner had become a symbol of hope and generosity, a testament to the power of small acts of kindness. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength, wisdom, and support to navigate them. The encounter with Daniel, the small gift, and the unwavering belief in the goodness of people had transformed her life forever. Lena smiled, feeling the full circle of her journey, and understood that the greatest changes often begin with the simplest gestures of the heart.